We are going to talk about applied physiology of exercises in day-to-day practice. What it's very common on our parts as of attending physician to tell our patients to go and start exercises. Now, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of time people either are not aware of what exercises are, or we ourselves are not really aware of what exercises should be recommended. Like, so today's endeavor is a little to throw a little light on what can be done and what exercises should be all about. So body, spirit, and mind together constitutes health. As everybody knows, health is a prerogative. It's not a right. It has to be earned. It cannot be bestowed. Like, I can't bestow health upon my parents or my daughters. And it cannot be purchased. So it has to be earned. We have to basically burn our backside and really get as much health as possible. So physical exercises basically means that it's a repetitive action which is done to a particular end. So whenever we exercise, it's like churning up our motions, cranking up the engine, getting our heart to pump blood, getting our lungs to take in more oxygen, getting our joints to have a better range of action, getting the muscles to contract, etc. So the benefits of exercise are tremendous. So what I'm going to do is all the later aspects I'll come to later on. The first and the most important thing is how exactly does exercise benefit us. So there's no doubt about it that every time you exercise, I'm going to project this from a diabetic or from a metabolic perspective. However, the other systems have also been covered up later on. So when I talk about, let's say, diabetes or HbA1c, it's just one aspect because this is what is being most studied. So what happens is every time you exercise, it has been shown that there is an average reduction of glycosylated hemoglobin by 0.73. Now understand one thing, there's a big advantage. So whenever you take tablets like metformin or glibenclamide, with that the HbA1c comes to about 1.5 or something. And now with no medicines, with only physiological exercises, if you're getting your HbA1c down by 0.73, I feel it's quite a hell of a lot of achievement. So exercises in type 1 diabetes are basically that you have a increased insulin sensitivity in muscles, liver, and fat cells. A single exercise session can increase insulin sensitivity for 16 hours, which is not a bad thing at all. So how does exercise benefit HbA1c? 30 to 60 minutes of aerobic exercises at 50 to 80% VO2 max. Now, about the VO2 max and all the terminology I'll be talking about in the subsequent slides reduces HbA1c by about 20% from baseline, which is quite a good achievement. Now, other exercises like circuit training or resistance training increase it by even more, by something like 8 something. So exercises and diabetes. So exercise helps control type 2 diabetes by basically increasing the body's utilization of insulin. Because as everybody knows, there is no deficiency of insulin in a diabetic person. It's only the utilization of insulin. It improves the body's own use of insulin. It burns excess body fat and helping to decrease and control weight. Now, as is well known, diabetes is nothing but obesity. So you get rid of 5% of your body weight, a person is not going to be a diabetic anyway. It improves insulin sensitivity. It increases the bone density and the bone strength. It lowers blood pressure. It helps to protect against the heart and blood vessel diseases by reducing bad cholesterol and increases the HDL also. Improves the blood circulation and reduces the risk of heart diseases, increase energy levels and enhancing work capacity. Now, this is something which is very important because, this is a subjective phenomena. A person starts feeling well. I mean, it cannot be objectively proven, but the person starts feeling better after a single session of exercise. He starts feeling, okay, I'm getting my, status in life. Increase energy levels, increasing work capacity, reduction of stress, and promoting relaxation and releasing the tension and anxieties. So the benefits of reducing HbA1c, a single reduction in HbA1c will have tremendous benefits, but there's a 35% decrease in the risk of microvascular complications, in diabetic-related deaths, in MIs, and in all-cause morbidity and mortality. So overall benefits of exercise in diabetes are tremendous. It's going to increase all these positive end aspects and reduce the complications of diabetes. So it has been made mandatory now, in fact, by august bodies like ADA and WHO, that every time you prescribe a prescription for diabetes, like, voglibose or metformin or pioglitazone or whatever, it's mandatory. In fact, it's a moral compulsion upon our parts to first talk about diabetes, about exercises to the patient, lifestyle modification, and then we come to drugs. it's all very easy to recommend, and some, we may know it, but we don't realize it how important it is, and that is what should be done. And that's why this next slide, that is hypocrites. Are we doctors hypocrites? The sense that, I mean, do we know it and yet we are not motivated enough to tell our patients to please go and exercise? It's very likely. In fact, I had done a survey for about 500 doctors in Navi Mumbai, and I was not really surprised to know that a lot of doctors don't exercise, and a whopping majority of us doctors don't really have a clear notion as to what exercises are all about, what are the types of exercises, what are the do's, what are the don'ts, what are the actual on-hand exercise prescription. And so the ignorance is tremendous. All of us, I mean, I'm not singling out, all of us are probably guilty of it. So the aims of this talk are going to talk about benefits of exercises, overviews of exercises, the technicalities and the physiology of exercise, but in a very palatable form. We are clinicians, we are not really physiologists or something. Exercise in diabetes and health, and as doctors. So the slides which I've made are basically the derivatives have come from all these bodies like ADA, WHO, ASD, ESC, etc., sports physiology and all that. So the benefits of exercises are tremendous. Reduce the reduction of body fat, increases lifespan, oxygen capacity. We know it. You open any site and you're going to see it. So we are going to see exactly how does it affect a day-to-day life. So what does it do onto the brain? Tremendous, because first and foremost, exercise debunks the myth that neurons cannot regenerate. It has been shown that every time you really exercise, there is an increase in the blood and oxygen to the brain. There is an increased growth factors because of which new nerve cells are created, and there is synaptic plasticity, increasing chemicals in the brain that help cognition, like dopamine, glutamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. All the feel-good hormones are liberated more when you exercise. And that's why there is a tremendous increase, actually, in anatomy and physiological increase in the nerve cells, because of which the person is feeling better. So, in fact, it has shown that it reduces the risk of developing dementia, and most importantly, it reduces the risk of falls in a Parkinson's patient. So, if you have a person with Parkinson's who's going to keep falling and breaking the hip bones and landing up into hospitals and all that, it's avoided. The mental exercise benefits are tremendous. So the depression and the anxieties and the obsessive behaviors definitely go down. In fact, endorphins act as natural pain relievers and antidepressants in the body. Every time you run, you release endorphins, which are beta endogenous opioid peptides. And that's why the runners have a runner's high. So they feel high, they feel contented the whole day long, So that's important. Now let's come to the cardiovascular tree. And in the cardiovascular tree, what you have is a tremendous reduction in complications. So you are going to have increase in the blood flow, increase in the cardiac output. You are going to have increase in the cardiac contractility, in the vascular distensibility, because of which the increased cardiac output and the right amount of blood reaches to the right amount of tissues with minimum fuss. Most importantly, the elasticity of the blood vessels increases. So at rest, if the body's requirement is X, and when you run, the body understands that it's going to be 2X or 4X. And depending upon that, the muscles contract and the blood vessels dilate, and the right nutrition the right nutrition is extracted from the heart and from the capillaries. So there is a direct relationship between the physical inactivity and cardiovascular mortality. So every time we don't exercise, we are doing disservice to ourselves. And that's why this tremendous concept nowadays of having cardiac rehabilitation programs immediately after MI. And that is the time when cardiologist knows that the patient is most vulnerable. Though the patient knows that he's never been exercising. And that is the time when he feels, oh my God, I've really made a lot of mistakes. I've never exercised my butt and my heart is gone for a toss. That is the time when the attending cardiologist or the physician can really tell him, look, it's never too late. Even after this, we have a very good rehabilitation program. Sign for it. You will definitely reap benefits. Okay, you've got a stent right now if you had a bypass surgery. But if you really work diligently, maybe it will not happen in the future. And that is the time. What about immune system? There is a tremendous body of literature which shows that every time you exercise on a regular basis, the immunity goes high. And that's why there is a reduction in the amounts of virus infections, bacterial infections, and of course malignancies, because malignancies are now looked upon as nothing but immunological failures. So all these things also happen. What about the sleep disturbances? So every time there is an exercise burst, there is a tremendous increase in the sleep. So probably it's a result of direct release of sleep-inducing hormones, or augmentation of naturally occurring hormones in the body which occurs in the night, and probably reduction in the sympathetic nervous system. So the system becomes more powerful, the system becomes more attuned to really acclimatize to the current scenarios. And that's why exercise has been looked upon as a healthy, safe, and inexpensive way to achieve more and better sleep. On the skeletal and muscular systems, the lesser said the better. It prevents osteoarthritis, increased muscle power, endurance, and contractility. There is an increased flexibility, prevents osteoporosis, and of course, there is tremendously reduced falls. Now, there is no doubt about it that the good dermatologist is going to vouch for it, that every time there is a regular burst of exercises, wrinkling reduces. And this is especially true in Tai Chi and in yoga. So now we are going to come over to some technicalities. So when I tell my patients we go exercise, he's going to ask me, Doc, what is exercise? So physical activity is basically any bodily movements which are produced by the skeletal muscles, resulting in energy expenditure which is above the resting state. So right now I'm just sitting over here, I'm talking to you guys, I'm hardly wasting any energies. But if I were to really stand and jog, that would be something. And whenever I keep on doing these activities over and over again, I get a state of physical fitness, which is a set of attributes that people have or achieve, which relates to the ability to perform a physical activity. In other words, I am fit to do something which is over and above what is required for me, in the same way that we save money and put in the bank. We don't really have to blow all our money, but we earn more than what we are probably going to ask for, because of the fear that maybe sometime we may have to, there may be some emergency and we may have to call upon our bank balance. So unforeseen surgeries or whatever. So just like that, we have to earn health and we have to keep it in some bank. So at some point of time, if we become old or frail or whatever, that extra power is important. That is basically what fitness is all about. So let's take an overall view of exercises. So aerobic exercises, there are three types of exercises, as everybody knows. We have aerobic exercises, which we have resistance training, and we have flexibility exercises. So aerobic exercises are the ones in which oxygen burns calories in such a way that you get a sustained endured muscle build activity. So the examples of which are walking, jogging, cycling, swimming, playing badminton, playing tennis or whatever. So in which your muscles are in action at lots of times, and the oxygen is constantly utilized by your lungs and by your metabolic system to create fuel. The second type of exercise is resistance training, in which you take some dumbbells and really pump iron. So because of which, whenever the muscles contract against a fixed load, you get a huge bulky muscles. The third is flexibility exercises, which is of course the best example is yoga. Now, are these mutually replaceable? No, everything is as important as the other. So what I recommend is maybe aerobics on Monday, resistance on Tuesday, and flexibility on Wednesday. And then these three go in cycles, for the simple reason that every exercise has its own sets of importance and hindrances. So aerobic exercises are going to make you supple. It's going to be tremendously good for your cardiovascular and your pulmonary system. Strength exercises are going to do a hell of a lot for your musculoskeletal system and for your bones in particular. And flexibility exercises are the most important, because in your day-to-day life, if you don't have to groan and moan, I think that's worth it. So the examples of aerobic exercises are all these. The examples of resistance trainings are all these. You can even use dumbbells or barbells or kettles or bands or whatever. And of course, the yoga is the best form of flexibility exercises. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the best combination of all these exercises are martial arts. So doing something like kickboxing or karate would include all the three together. And and plus you get the benefits of being in a condition where you can lick somebody. You can't really have to take a rubbish from people. So let's talk about METs. MET is basically unit of exercise. So we measure exercise in terms of METs. So when I ask somebody, how much have you exercised? When he says I've exercised for 45 minutes, it doesn't make any rubbish impression upon me. Technically, it's the METs which I'm interested in. So MET is metabolic equivalent. So it is the energy which a body utilizes in burning 3.5 ml of oxygen per kilogram per minute. So right now I'm just sitting over here. I am at minimum level. So probably my expenditure would be 1 MET right now. But if I were to stand, if I were to do squats, if I were to do some just spot jogging, my weights would go up to about say 1.5, 2.5 or something, because I would hyperventilate. And the more oxygen that is consumed, the more calories are going to be burnt. So light activity is something which is less than 3 minutes, like gentle walks or bicycle, etc. Moderate is something between 3 to 6, which is brisk walking, recreational swimming, volleyball, aerobics, etc. Gardening, believe it, gardening is tough work. We tend to invoice it. And of course, vigorous is really fast walking or jogging, running, table tennis, basketball, skipping, etc. So whenever you're talking about vigorous, it's about 6 minutes. So what is the amount of physical activity that promotes health? So what we normally recommend is moderate intensity of physical activity, at least 3 to 6 minutes, at least 3 to 5 days of a week. So about 150 minutes of exercise per week divided in 5 installments. So let's say 30 minutes per day for about 5 to 6 days should be adequate. So this is the minimum amount of exercise which is mandatory for somebody to be assured of a fairly good health. So those that demanded more than 150 minutes of exercise were associated with a 0.89 drop in HbA1c. And those that demanded HbA 150 or less, led to 0.36. So you can understand that it's the higher exercise, the more. But there's a bell curve over here. So if one keeps on exercising disastrously for something like, huge, obscene amounts, like professional athletes, that itself has its own disadvantages. So exercise is a double-edged sword. So these are a lot of things are now coming up in the US also, and they feel that there is a tremendous sense in yoga, because yoga cures every aspect of disease, right from brain to the toe, and by various mechanisms, by endocrine system, by musculoskeletal system, and most importantly by the tuning between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The other thing is the VO2 max. So what happens is the maximum oxygen consumption is actually measured. An athlete is made to run on the treadmill, and these gadgets are fitted over him, and the amount of CO2 that he exhales and the amount of oxygen which he inhales is actually calculated, and his blood tests are done, lactic acid and all that is measured, and we understand the term VO2 max. So VO2 max is basically the amount of peak oxygen uptake which a person utilizes for running or something. Now it has to be understood that a lot of times VO2 max, this concept, is a little difficult to understand. Purebred horses are going to have maximum VO2 max. So when we say that this Arabian stallion, he really jogs, he's got a VO2 max of something like 450 ml per kilogram per minute, which is huge. A human body, a male is going to have something like 45 or something. A female is going to have 35 ml per kilogram or something. A Siberian husky is the most powerful. That Siberian husky is something like 500 to 600. So the technical term of excellence, of physical excellence, is VO2 max. So now when actually a person's body starts exercising, what happens? So what are the various intricacies which happen? What is the biochemistry? What is the physiology and all that? So most important over here is every time that you exercise, there are huge amounts of biochemical changes that occur. So there is a muscular contraction, the acetylcholine is liberated, because of which the calcium channel open, the potassium channels open, and then the first obvious stuff, the proponin and the rhodopsin rods, they slip into each other, myofilaments shorten. So for all this, the glycogen has to be burned and the ATP has to be produced. So this is the sort of biochemical changes that occur. Now, it has to be understood that every activity you do entails different physiology. So for a short sprint, a sprint of 100 meters or something, type 2 fibers are going to be activated. But if you want to go for a prolonged jog or a prolonged sprint or a prolonged marathon, is the type 1A fibers which are affected. If you want to have a quick burst or dumbbells fast, or you want to do a quick bench press, is the type 2A fibers which are coming into play. So every time you have a different activity, different sets of muscles are called to play, and different biochemical aspects come. Now, this is not really the platform, but we have to be aware of something like a Corgi cycle and the Krebs cycle and the citric acid cycle, in which the glycogen is burned to cause ATP. A lot of times fats are burnt, and as a very last resort, the body starts catabolizing its own proteins. So basically, whatever eat, whatever glucose is there in the blood is metabolized first for creating of ATPs. When that fails, it's probably the fat which is metabolized, and if even that is exhausted, then the glycogen which is there inside the cells is called upon to supply energy. So that's why whenever you want to exercise, I think due importance has to be given on the nutrition also. Now, this is a very interesting concept about the GLUT, the glucose uptake transport receptor systems. So the GLUT mechanism has been thought of in the last many years, and a lot of people ask, okay, I'm a diabetic, and you as a doctor, you're going blue in your face trying to convince me to exercise. But what happens, doc? Why should I exercise? So the answer is over here in the GLUT mechanism. Every time you exercise, there are some changes because of which inside the nucleus, the GLUT mechanisms which are there buried inside the cytoplasm, they actually come closer towards the nucleus and the nucleoli, and they have projections because of which the glucose which is circulating outside in the capillaries is internalized, brought inside the cell and glycated. So it's very easily understood that every time a diabetic person exercises, that excessive sugar which is circulating in the blood is internalized and it's metabolized. That's what we want, and that is what the GLUT mechanism is. So the GLUT mechanism is actually nature's blessing upon us, because of which the glucose is internalized and there is euglycemia which is achieved. Needless to say, every time you exercise, every time the muscles are contracted, you get more and more GLUT4 receptors to the surface, and there is better sugar control. There are a lot of GLUTs. So we have GLUT1 and 3, which are more in the brain. GLUT2 and 5 are more in the intestines. And of course, 6 and 7 are yet being found out, but we are not sure as to what they deal with. So every time there is exercise, the glucose, by this complicated mechanism, is broken down into glucose 6-phosphate. From the glucose 6-phosphate, we get ATP, which is basically energy. So that's why we have more blood flow, more capillary recruitment, and that sort of a thing. And that's why exercises are beneficial. So lipid metabolism is also increased by exercises. Now, can exercise prevent or delay diabetes? 100% yes. There has been a lot of studies, especially which was done on doctors way back in 1992 in Harvard study. And 2 groups were taken. One group was not asked to exercise. The second group was asked to exercise. And the group of doctors who exercised had a tremendously low amount of sugar in the subsequent decades of their lives. Now, this is a Chinese study which actually showed that people who were normal and people who had diabetes and who were made to do exercises, it was shown that exercises regularly performed for about 120 to 200 minutes per week reduces the incidence of diabetes in people predisposed to diabetes. So this graph clearly shows that the red ones are the people who never exercised, and the yellow ones are the people who have been exercising and then who were made to do the GTT. And there's a definite reduction in the sugar control in people who exercised. So what is the energy expenditure during physical activity? Now, this is a huge thing. So every time you walk, you burn 0.07 calories per kilogram per minute. You run, it becomes double. So it becomes 0.13 kilocalories per kilogram per minute. So likewise for swimming, rope skipping, all these calories have been mentioned over there. And so suppose I am 60 kilos and I walk for about 5 minutes. So I'm going to waste something like 0.07 into 60, that's 4.2. 4.2 into 5, that's about 20 calories. So that is how calculations are to be done. The same METs has also been calculated. So fast or slow walking is 2.5 METs, fast walking is 4 METs. So it's all there. Basically, we just have to apply it in our day-to-day life. Now, this is important as to how to calculate energy expenditure during brisk walking. So how do I give an exercise prescription? So I have a person who's weighing about 76 kilograms. And so every time he walks, he's going to burn these many calories. Now, I know that to lose 1 kilogram of weight, a person has to spend 7,700 kilocalories. Okay. So now I just calculate. I just tell this patient, okay, you are 76. Right now, your target is about 70. So you have to lose 6 kilograms. So if you walk for 30 minutes a day, you're going to spend blah, blah amounts of calories. When this caloric loss comes to 7,700 calories, you lose 1 kilo. And that is how you keep calculating. The $1 million thing over here, of course, is exercise is important, but then nutrition is equally important. So what people do is they jog for 45 minutes and they come home and they take a vada pav, and it's all lost because you might have wasted some 400, 500 calories, but you've put on 300 calories by just one vada pav in 2 minutes. So life is unfair, but that's it. So exercise in type 1 diabetes It's important, but it's not as important as in type 2. So exercise prescription for a diabetic. So again, this is just an example. The person I'm talking about is a diabetic, but it can be applied to anybody. It might be ISD or pulmonary hypertension or whatever. So the first and the most important thing when you are asking a person to exercise is to find out whether the person is really fit to exercise or not. In today's litigious era, and people who come up and bash doctors, we don't want any hassles. So the most important thing is to find out whether the patient is fit. So a detailed physical evaluation has to be done. His pulse, blood pressure, equality of pulses on both arms. Peripheral vascular disease has to be ruled out. Retinopathy is very important because every time you jump, talk, the retinal vasculature is hampered. Nephropathy, because you know that every time you run, you're going to have proteins in the urine, whether the autonomic neuropathy is there or not. So you exercise, there's going to be stress. The heart has to pump more blood. There has to be increased sympathetic supply. In case the person has got dysautonomia, it's going to be a problem. Peripheral neuropathy has to be ruled out. We don't want any patient to get any ulcers or something because of loss of sensations over the legs. So all these tests have to be done. Some maybe a Doppler study of the lower limbs, physical advances to see whether the pulses are felt or not. And of course, whether the patient's baseline pulse, blood pressure, sugars are under control or not. So in which case, what I would do is I would assess the person thoroughly and then ask the person to go for a particular exercise which suits him or her best. I think it will be stupid to ask a 55-year-old guy who's never exercised in his life to join a gym and do exercises and weights and this. He's just going to laugh at you. So what I would do is start gentle walks at least. If I have somebody who's got peripheral neuropathy and who cannot walk or who's got bad osteoarthritis, I'll ask him to start swimming. Or maybe if he cannot swim, just walk underwater, that excessive resistance. Then limit the weight bearing exercises, like for people who have peripheral neuropathy. So you have to choose your patients and your exercises carefully, so you don't want any problems. If you have a patient who's got a recent MI, it will be stupid to ask him to go for jogging right away. I don't want him to get another coronary attack while he's on the treadmill. In which case, he has to be really assessed. How is his ST depression? How is his cardiac output? What is his ejection fraction? Best would be to do a stress echo or a dopamine echo to find out whether the heart is coping up with exercise or not. All these sort of things have to be done. If the patient has got asthma, you have to find out whether the spirometry is okay or not. If he's got obstruction, maybe ask him to take a puff and then exercise. All sorts of things. For diabetic retinopathy, really exercises which are very cumbersome and which are very hard are best avoided, because with exercises, the blood vessels can rupture, giving rise to hemorrhages or retinal detachments. So in which case, gentle swimming or yoga would be really good. Same with kidney disorders. Now, whenever a patient has a kidney disorder, he's always already in a state of advanced and a catabolic state. So in which case, giving good nutrition and then giving exercise prescription makes more sense. Now, cardiac diseases we have already talked about. So these are the do's and the don'ts. So these are the classical exercise precautions, which is nothing but common sense, I feel. So if your patient has got a diabetic condition, it's better that he or she is assessed for the sugar control. Extremely high sugars or extremely low sugars are both dangerous for diabetes. The person is best asked to take his insulin shot and then go for exercises after taking some snacks. A small snack can be advised when the patient is exercising also. Better always to go with somebody the patient knows or with an identification mark. Just, God forbid the patient goes into hypos or something. Then, of course, for diabetic conditions, taking proper snacks before exercise is equally important. So all these things are already there. So in spite of that, there are a few things which are very hazy, in the minds of most people and the doctors. So whenever you exercise, it's not really mean. It doesn't really necessarily connote that your weight has to go down or your blood pressure has to go down. Well, it will. But in spite of that, the point I'm trying to make is, despite all this, in spite of not really reducing weight on the weighing scale, the benefits accrue. A person starts feeling better. The person's sugar comes down. The person's blood pressure comes down. It might take a little time. Some people take something like 3 to 6 months, but he'll start feeling better. And he will not resist exercises. In fact, after a couple of months, he'll look forward to it because it's somewhere over here. He starts feeling, no, I feel better when I exercise. So that happens. So this is something which I always recommend. So in case you feel the life is really fast in 2018 and you don't really have time to go to the gym or do some advanced exercises, can you somehow manipulate so that you can exercise in your day-to-day activity? It's possible. So all these things are given over here. So whenever you can fold exercises into your day-to-day activity rather than try and go to the gym and get frustrated because you're getting late or something. Nowadays, in fact, in most corporates, they have this thing called walking meetings. So what they do is, instead of sitting across the table and walk in chat, what they do is they take a nice stroll with a cup of coffee in your hand, walk across the terrace or maybe on the streets around by. So you get a good exercise. At the same time, you can also have your meeting. So that is being done with. So this exercise is a classical picture, which actually when you see two old faces, but if you look very clearly, you'll see two young faces playing a guitar. So that is exactly what I mean to say. One can be fat and yet fit. So there's this new concept now called fat but fit. So you may have a little adipose tissue around your glutea or on your waist, but yet you can be fit. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that only a slim and thin person is fit. No, we Indians have a condition called TOFI, which means thin outside but fat inside. So we may appear to be slim and trim, but actually we are obese because we have more abdominal obesity and reduced muscle mass. Contrarily, we may have a person who's a little chubby, but who's also got muscle mass, who exercises his butt off. So he may appear to be a little overweight by the BMI standards or by the body mass index or on the scale, but that guy might be fit. So the concept of fat but fit has to be there. And never mind the scale or the fittings, benefits definitely do accrue. So there is a definitely lesser mortality and morbidity in people who exercise regularly, which has been seconded by the Surgeon General of the FDA USA. Now there are peculiar things, some people with minimum exercise put on huge amount of muscles, especially for the Russians and the East Europeans, like, Hungarians and all that. They have tremendous, it's a genetic trait. And whereas some people like Indians try how as much hard as we may, the muscles don't really sprout up as much as this population. That is their genetics. And of course, we have a lot of abuse going on nowadays. I see a lot of people who go to the gym and who are advised whey proteins and creatinine and corticosteroid shots, erythropoietins, and anabolic hormones, which is really dangerous. So something which should not really be appreciated. So basically, this was exercise, and it doesn't really matter about what the physical things are. It's just about feeling good with exercise. And nobody can tell you how a red color looks like. You have to see red and experience for yourself what red is all about. So it's basically just exercising and feeling and how good you feel after exercises. So I think the more we actually exercise, the more we are going to start feeling better. And that feeling of betterment has to be conveyed to our patients. So let's hope this trend continues, and let's hope that this positivity comes from us medical faculties so that we are in a position to influence our patients more and more into exercising. Thank you so much for a patient hearing.